Please turn off your camera and keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking. हम सब हिंदी और अंग्रेजी में बात कर सकते हैं, तो अगर आपको बेहतर लगता है हिंदी में हमसे बात करना, प्लीज हिंदी का इस्तेमाल करें और हम सब आसानी से आपकी बातों को ट्रांसलेट भी कर सकेंगे अगर किसी को हिंदी में परेशानी है तो. We have ample time, especially for this session. We wanted to dive deeper into the findings as well as methods that ICRW has been using. So please feel free to liberally use the chat window, note down your questions and reflections, and we'd sort of take them in the conversation section. What we're going to do is have a 5-minute introduction, which reads this. I'm going to hand it over then to the Couple Engage team at ICRW, who will make their presentation and share with us their study. And then we'll have an open discussion that I can facilitate, and we'll see how that goes. Great. Very quickly again, CoreNet is a community of practice which was set up for researchers who are working on COVID to maximize impact as well as improve ethics and equity in research. We at the moment, since its inception in May, have now become 45 members. We're represented through 170 members on Slack. There are 65 plus research projects that are available for you to view on corenet.in. There are also 2 active working groups that are now working towards shared research outputs, both on nutrition and food security, as well as frontline workers. So if you are interested in any of this, please feel free to go on to the website or reach out to us on hello@corenet.in, and we'd be happy to help you out. Coffee hour sessions, as many of you know already, are planned for 4 to 5 p.m. on Thursday evenings, and really the space is for all of you to share your studies, learn from each other, and learn about what is the new sort of work coming out in the landscape at the moment. This is co-created, so please feel free in case you would want to present your own work, or if there are particular studies you want to be looking forward to, please do let us know, and we'd be happy to help out with that. Okay, I will now hand it over to Kuhika and Sneha, who are senior researchers at ICRW, to share with us their study, which was on qualitative sort of work about family planning in times of COVID. Okay, over to
Thank you
Kuhika.
so much, Rohan. This is Neha here from the Couple Engage team. And of course, I would be doing the presentation with Kuhika today. We also have our other team members, Sharmishta, Ishwarya, Pranita, and also Amrita, who has helped us a lot as a consultant on this study. Um, and also would like to thank Coded for giving this like a platform for all of us to share the different research studies being carried out in the context of COVID. So just starting, so this rapid research that we conducted is part of a larger project called Couple Engage. Can I have the next slide, please? Thanks. So Couple Engage is a 2-year project that we have been undertaking along with our partners, Vihara Innovation Network, where we are trying to explore methods to make family planning more gender equitable. So in that we use a human-centered design to understand how couples take decisions on contraceptive uptakes and how we can emphasize on the role of men as partners. So looking at the shifts that have been brought by COVID-19, we just thought that it is important that we also understand what would its implication look like on family planning. So we conducted a rapid research to explore how the pandemic and the consequent lockdown after it affected the daily lives of the couples, the dynamics between them, also the sexual lives and the contraceptive behaviors. Can I have the next slide, please? Thanks. So the study is guided by 3 key research questions. So we wanted to understand how COVID-19 has influenced couples' contraceptive choices. What are some of the important considerations from the communities that couples keep in mind in uptaking certain FP methods or choosing to not take FP methods, and was that sort of change during COVID-19? and then also try to understand how COVID-19 has shaped the use of technology in health space, especially in FP service provisioning, as well as demand generation or access to these services. Next slide. So the study was conducted in Begusarai in Bihar and Kanpur Dehat in Uttar Pradesh, and this was a 3-month study from June to August 2020, and we conducted 40 KIIs at with different stakeholders, which included 17 women and 23 men across the various categories. Next slide. So before moving on to the findings, just wanted to give a background on some of the processes or the challenges that we faced while doing this study and how did we adapt to those challenges. So firstly, this was a qualitative research that we conducted, and uh, qualitative research depends largely on observation and studying of body language or expression or gestures, which was not possible in a remote setting because we were doing telephonic interviews. So we did try and study the tonality that the respondent was using, but this was sort of lacking in this research, and this might have so all these points would have had an impact on how we interpreted the findings. Again, the audio recording in a telephonic interview is, of course, very important, but due to the quality of recording not being good, the importance of note taking is also enhanced during such experiences, because and the interviewers do not have the experiential memory of interaction in such interviews. The time was also higher in this study because there was a heavy reliance on coordination with our on-ground partners, and then the further coordination with the respondents, because we depended on the partners to help us reach out to the respondents. We were also asking them certain questions that would be considered sensitive. So the interviewers spent a lot of time in building that rapport during the initial few minutes of the conversation, so that they are able to open up with us and also talk to us without having ever met us. There were unexpected technological issues from disruption of electricity supply or network issues, which of course made the process much more time consuming. Uh, there was also miscommunication because the risk of miscommunications are higher in this kind of a setting, and the often the brief that ICRW gave to the partners was misconstrued by the respondents. So there was a continuous hand holding that we had to do during this process. Next slide, please. So moving on to the findings, I would just firstly share an overview of what was happening in the family planning landscape. So to address and control the spread of COVID-19, the government of India implemented a complete lockdown in March 2020. The advisory that came around this time did not have any specific guidelines that talked about continuation or discontinuation of family planning services, which led to confusion among public and private sector providers. The health facilities also shifted their focus on pandemic response, which disrupted the access and availability of all family planning services, and especially those that required clinical assistance. In early April, facilities only continued with providing institutional deliveries. And then several reports and articles and commentaries started emerging that it is anticipated that there would be an exponential rise in unplanned pregnancy and abortions during this period, which led to several experts pushing the government to release a new guideline with inclusion of family planning services as an essential need. And in mid-April, MOHFW, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, released a guideline to provide eligible couples with contraceptives through ASHAs and public health facilities. This, of course, did not include IUCD and sterilization. Next slide. we also, with the experts, we got varied responses on what was being used by the couple. So some said that more couples were leaning on easily accessible methods such as condoms and pills, but some of them also spoke about how reversible contraceptives like injectables and PPIUCDs were still somewhat being accessed. But sterilization definitely took a hit during this time. By June, when the restrictions were lifted, a lot of the facilities resumed the services, but the fear of virus was high amongst couple, and they continued to use short-term contraceptives and were fearful of visiting any facilities. And the experts were of the opinion that the supply and demand, the streamlining of the supply and demand will take a few months. Next slide. Uh, now we will be moving on to what was happening at the community level. Uh, uh, but before we move on to the findings from our focus area, which were on contraceptive behavior, sexual behavior, and couple dynamics, it is important to understand for the community level stakeholders what the pandemic meant. So for them, it was basically the economic struggles that came along with the pandemic that was worsened during this time. It was not the virus per se, but the lockdown and the loss of livelihoods and the implications of it that was the cause of their collective suffering. Though they were being provided with ration, gas cylinders, and Manrega work, it was still inadequate to fulfill their needs. Farmers in the two locations that we were conducting a research, they were slightly better off than compared to the migrants because they at least had food which they grew themselves and that they were able to sustain on that. But migrants who returned back to the villages faced a shortage of both food and money. And after coming to the villages, they were not able to find a proper economic opportunity or a job for themselves and were generally underemployed in the work that they were doing. Next slide. With the scarcity of cash, more men talked about borrowing money from fellow villagers and especially from those who belong to the same caste groups because the interest levied on this amount was low. They also depended on credit systems from the shop to buy their essential to fulfill their essential needs and buy essentials such as salt or oil. Uh, and because of the economic distress that was coming with the pandemic and the lockdown and the loss of livelihood, men spoke about the mansik tanav or depression that they were facing and they were grappling with. And because of that, the families and the couples were experiencing mental and emotional strain. And that was also a leading cause of why there were conflicts between in the households. Then moving on, we will be talking about the findings from a key focus area, which is on couple dynamics, sexual behavior, and contraceptive behavior. But before we do that, just wanted to highlight that the two findings that I talked about, which was the economic distress and psychological stress, sort of makes the background of what we are going to talk about now and how the implications on other aspects of the lives of the couples stem from these two findings. So to take us through these findings, I would now hand it over to Kuhika.
Thank you so much, Sneha, for framing the context so well for me. So we'll begin with how the intimate space of the couple looked like. And as Sneha mentioned that we had already conducted an immersive fieldwork for Couple Engage in the pre-COVID days. So this layered study sort of helped us in sense making of what happened thereafter in the COVID era. Let's look at what the intimate space looked like, how the couple dynamic and the sexual behavior of the couples looked like. So in terms of household work, of course, there has been reportage as well as other articles that have come in place. And our primary research also did suggest that unpaid burden of work, of course, is higher on women. and men do not undertake any household chores. And even in cases where they were willing to, in very minuscule proportion, where we did find that some men were doing some tasks of the household, they were looked down upon and mocked by the community and the neighbors, and called ki ye to gulami karta hai, and other phrases that were sort of then left to their own understanding. The other thing was that even the public-private divide between the ghar and the bahar was very stark as well. And even though men were comfortable in getting groceries and other things, what they would do at best was also teaching the child, which was looked at as a gender neutral sort of a space. But other chores were not something they focused on at all. It was interesting because we did interview migrant men as well as resident men of the community. That as migrants, men do perform a lot of household chores in the destination cities where they go to work. But when they come back, they do not want to partake in any of that sort of household labor. Next slide, please. So yeah, the next, in this slide, we'll talk about how women were perceived and looked at as the oppressed anchors of men by not only men themselves, but most of the stakeholders in the community. If you would have seen the breakup for our sample, we did interview a lot of varied stakeholders across the layers of the ecosystem, be it Ashas, Anganwadis, and also PRI members. So the lockdown sort of accentuated women to their households and their accentuated their isolation. The one or two places, for example, in locations where there were SHGs, where women used to step out, even that was curtailed. Going to the natal household, even that was curtailed. So in certain senses, women were pushed to the households, and men were already facing a lot of financial difficulties, and they were asked to play their role of the ideal wife and sort of being a pillar of support, with themselves being bereft of any support at all. A quote by one of the Anganwadi workers also say that women also say that husbands aren't able to earn ever since the lockdown. There are a lot of difficulties. We make them understand that the virus is such that you have to adjust with whatever little your husband is getting. Even if your husband says something in anger, you should handle it calmly. So these were repeated narratives that came from many stakeholders. Next slide, please. So all these from the initial slides that Sneha spoke about, the economic distress, the psychological stress, and usage of terms like mansik tanav, depression, further not being able to fulfill the basic needs of the family, all that did have a very profound impact on the spousal communication that the couple shared. It strained and soured their relationship to quite a bit. Young parents were particularly strained because men were not being able to perform their role of a provider. So we had narratives like "बच्चा बिस्किट मांगता है और हम दे नहीं पाते, बहुत बहुत बुरा लगता है," and other things that the men spoke about. So men tried to cope with these anxieties and agitation with alcohol and other means of sort of distraction. But even then, conflicts were rampant. Stakeholders sort of spoke about how in the neighborhood there are, we can hear it. We can hear कि घरों में लोगों के लड़ाई हो रही है, गाली गलौज बढ़ गया है. Especially the migrant men who have come back after having spent a hefty amount in coming back and not having a network in the source village where they belong to, did have a lot of conflicts in the intimate space. So next slide, please. All this did, of course, have a bearing on the sexual behavior of men and women. It did have a impact on how they looked at sex, and even though in the initial periods when the virus, the nature of the virus was not known, and in some areas it was spoken about, we did not sort of have sex because we had a fear that we would infect our partner, or we did not know how the infection is posed, so we may be carriers. So after that initial sort of confusion died down, sexual activity did resume, and did carry on pretty rampantly. Sexual distancing was of course rare, and couples engaged in sex more frequently, and all the more in the case of newly married couples who did not abstain because the fertility pressures that they face, and also because of their new communion and the pressures that they bring to it. So there were men who spoke about कि सारा दिन कमाई का टेंशन रहता है, but sex was also seen as an excuse for release of stress. कि मूड बन जाता है और क्या करिएगा, दिन में स्ट्रेस रहता है बट रात को कर लेते हैं. Things, narratives like these also came through. Next slide, please. So that was a bit about the couple dynamic and the repercussion or the bearing it had on the sexual behavior of couples. From there, we'll now move on to the contraceptive behavior of couples. Next slide, please. So even though the norms altogether did not change, and the imperative to have a child and son preference was very high and was spoken about by the mouths of various stakeholders, it did seem that the impact on the notion and practice of early first birth did have some negotiatory space. Something that the young couples, particularly where the man and women both were a little educated, they did sort of use the pandemic as an argument to put forth to the immediate family and the extended family that we do not have a financial stability. The delay of first birth we may be delaying our first birth by some time. What that time frame looks like is something that research and deeper dives would need to be taken. Next slide, please. So yes, on contraceptive use, it was clear that that condoms were that there was a marked increase in the demand for and use for condoms. That is also because of easy access issues with this particular method, and but it was not exponential. It was considerably higher, but not that high as well. Maybe men were using condoms as a risk aversion strategy during this period. Women, as previous research also shows, women still did avoid oral pills, and with the common perception that it has ill effects on their health. Men from the community also spoke against use of pills. Pharmacists, since we also interviewed pharmacists and RMPs in both our sites, they also spoke about how the sale of condoms has increased quite a bit, and it's closely followed by the sale of pills, but not to the same extent. We did not hear of our respondents talk about IUDs or Antara injections, and those were sparsely reported. In the words of an RMP from Kanpur, Bihar, so he goes on to say that the demand for condom and pregnancy kits has increased during lockdown. Men come to buy these things. Last week, 2 to 4 women have come to buy pregnancy kits as well, but less are coming now. So when they sort of go on to give a figure that it has been 8 to 10 boxes higher than before. Next slide, please. Another interesting thing I think that we did come across, and we even in the pre-COVID days we used to hear that there has been an othering, that there are certain communities that do not practice FP and will not practice FP. But in this pandemic situation and the conversations that we had with our multiple stakeholders, this othering seems to have increased, and it's depicted by the socio-economic markers of class, caste, educational status, or religious identity. And for example, a samajhdar man or wo aadmi samajhdar hai is always a man, an educated man belonging to an upper caste and class. And it was used, this archetype of a man was used to portray that these are the ones who use family planning methods and are more responsible, so to say. And the ones who do not fit into these archetypes are seen as ignorant. And and even if they use a method, they are seen as resorting to using it as an afterthought, or using it as the most easily accessible method that they use. So the term Samajdar is not used for certain class and caste of people. So the collective perception of community stakeholders, be it the ASHAs, be it the PRI members, SHG group, It continues to have that people will have certain section of the community will continue to have larger and unplanned families despite financial inabilities, and this perception seems to be heightened during this pandemic. Next slide, please. So from moving to the demand side, sort of, and going into the intimate space of the man and the woman, we also interviewed the other stakeholders. So this is a glimpse. Of course, we have a much more detailed presentation and insight, but given the time constraints, we'll stick to a few slides. Let's go into what did it mean for the access of contraceptives. So pharmacists and RMPs were looked at as men's quasi-counselors, which seems to be, and that's something that has come in the pre-COVID times as well, that they are the go-to people, even for counseling, even for unofficial advice that men want to take. Sometimes there are men who refer to the pharmacist as "mera pharmacist dost hai." That again seems to have gone quite high in the current circumstances. It could also be partly because of the fallout and of the thinning stocks of contraceptives with Ashas. Since after the few months, there was no supply that one could find with them. The other thing that came across that even though minuscule, some women were seen to be buying condoms and pills at the pharmacies, but that was done through chit system or writing a note and giving it to the pharmacist. No advice, no words spoken, just an over-the-counter hushed buying of the product. So in the words of a pharmacist from Begusarai, women don't come very often, maybe once or twice in a month when they have no contraceptives. When women come, they write the name on a piece of paper and I pick it and give it to them. They don't say the name directly to me. They don't ask me for any advice as well. Next slide, please. As we were going through various interviews and also analyzing our data and understanding the depths of it, it also came through that even though there was a spike in demand, the supply was sort of a dampener because it couldn't align itself in time, and we all know the reasons for it: the lockdown, the unlock, the lockdown again, and no thinking through of how the last mile service delivery will eventually happen in the first few crucial months. So stakeholders across this ecosystem did speak about a spike in both condoms and pills in that order, and as well as abortion commodities. Stocks with Asha soon got exhausted, and even the PHCs and CHCs were not restocked after a while, and public transport's unavailability and access unavailability also led to sort of not being able to, Ashas not being able to access that. The pharmacist, although did speak about a brief slip in the supply of condoms, as the raw material required to manufacture condoms was delayed by the lockdown. So in the words of another RMP, there were restrictions during the lockdown. The rubber from being imported from Malaysia to produce condoms was also not available. There were supply issues for pills too. Also, because more men were at home, it is expected that sexual relations were more, and we will see more pregnancies. So there were sort of a little mixed opinion around even the supply of condoms. Next slide, please. I'll stop here for a bit. So these are, so through our primary research, prior work, and even subject matter expert interviews, there were a few things, few learnings and some recommendations that came across, and we thought it will be good to present some of these, but I can wait a bit and take questions maybe first.
Rohan,
Okay,
can
great,
I go?
Great, thanks. Super interesting. Yes, yeah, I was just going to say, please go.
Okay, thanks, Goika. That's really interesting. I think I've heard a shorter version of this earlier. I'm, the question is for asking stakeholders about couples' intimate lives. How reliable is this in terms of what you've presented? Because you seem to have presented very intimate details, as if you've directly talked to respondents, but you haven't. So if you can just reflect a little bit on the caveats or of what you're presenting, it would be useful, because also the understandably it probably wasn't easy to directly have conversations on mobiles on these issues. So I would like you to reflect a little bit on that.
The team who would want to respond?
Yeah, I'll just respond a bit, but I would request if anyone else from the team also wants to come in. Thanks, Priya, for this question. So, as I did say that we interviewed stakeholders who were part of some sort of a group, so that they would have access to more people from that group. Say, like when we did speak to men, they were part of like Durga Samiti or any like that kind of a group, or playing a youth leader sort of a role. So from them we wanted to understand, because also from men, they do share or their friends are that kind of a sounding board to share those uh, details. So with them we wanted to understand what's happening in with respect to other couples lives. But while talking, they also talked about their own journeys, and even when we were talking to SHG members, they started opening about their own lives and what's happening with them. And because they did not have any avenue to speak about any such issues, they actually felt uh, that they felt that this is an important thing that they should share with someone, or we just became like a sharing point for them. So that was also happening. So while we do accept that our questions are framed in a way that we asked with respect to couples otherwise, but they also spoke about their own lives, and that's how we triangulated the findings, and that's how we are presenting it here. Hope that answers, or if anyone else wants to respond from the team.
Thanks, Neha. Thanks. It's fine. And there are other questions on the chat, so I won't take more time. Thank you.
Great. Anyone else who has a question? I can
Nandita
see
has a
Sunny.
question.
Not so much a question. Hi, this is Nandita. Not so much a question, but more of a reflection. I think the finding around using the pandemic as a sort of negotiation space was very interesting, because a lot of the sort of narrative that we often see, and a lot of the data as well, shows how women are basically, the lack of choice, not getting your preferred form. But I think the sort of agency and the couple agency sort of displayed, I mean, obviously this is just qualitative, but still, I think some of these findings are really interesting. But I think my kind of quest, like a follow up of that, was just whether I think, because Kuhika, you mentioned that these couples, like these findings were noted among maybe more educated couples or something. I don't know if I heard that correctly, but
Yes.
but I was just wondering whether this, like, um, whether sort of higher relationship quality or having a more equitable sort of the couple's relationship was sort of mediating this. So just your reflections on that.
Yeah, so Nandita, since we did not we did not conduct IDIs, but these were community stakeholders of KIS, the intimate space of the couple is known through their opinions, and hence the equitability of the relationship is hard to gather in these circumstances, and also remote circumstances. But of course, people who spoke about it were newly married, were younger in their early 20s. They were mostly educated, but there were also maybe a few who spoke about, and it's an early emerging trend. So that's what I mentioned even when I was presenting. So it's something worth noticing and maybe deep diving.
I agree.
I'll leave it at that for now.
No, I agree. I think it's definitely something worth noticing and worth deep diving.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, and just to add, I think this is also a good opportunity to build on. So, like this whole recognition that the crisis, economic crisis, and that, and this intention to delay so that to have another child at the time when things economic situation is better. This is also linked to the earlier, like the our study during like the pre-COVID time, this whole aspiration, and how we can really use aspiration as an entry point to have a conversation around family planning, which is quite positive from couples point of view, because they are young people, have a lot of aspiration of good life, good family, and that provides really good opportunity. And I think this is continuing in that process. It's just that COVID crisis, people have used that as a bargaining or negotiation as an instrument.
Great, great. Thanks for that, Pranita. I mean, linked to that is a question of curiosity I had. Did you also see, especially in the context of using COVID as a as a hook to bargain, especially with the other persons, were there any insights on if this was also linked to any general changes that were spotted in general health-seeking behavior, and if FP was linked to that in some way?
Actually, in our study, because that time lockdown had just started opening up, but still there was a lot of lockdown was still there, and there was a lot of restriction. So just I think in our study we had, one was like some level of disconnect people were feeling towards the frontline workers, as that was more out of like two sets of fear that seemed to be emerging. One was that frontline workers are meeting with so many other families, so the fear of infection somewhere it was there. And also especially for the migrant men, they were really be fearful of frontline worker, as frontline worker were responsible for screening and informing authorities with respect to if there is any case, or if anyone has come from outside for quarantine. So there was that some disconnect, like in any case frontline workers, their engagement with men has not been very high, but this time the disconnect was even more. But not much had come out on the general health seeking behavior. Probably now if we do some study, we can see that the trust factor or the fear of infection from facility may still be there. But I mean, we didn't really able to capture much around that. But maybe Koika, Sneha, if you have anything to add.
No, Pranita, I think you summarized that. I
Yeah,
can take Priya's question, maybe. Priya is asking, women reaching out to pharmacists with slips of paper, are we suggesting that it's a post-COVID phenomena? Or perhaps you're suggesting earlier women would not go to pharmacists. So Priya, we did not actually in our earlier work or research see that women were reaching out to the pharmacist, and this was something that came out in these times only. And there are certain insights which we haven't presented as of now as well, that women were also very frustrated with the increased demand on sexual activity. So they would also try all sorts of hacks of uh, and reaching out to pharmacists with the slip of paper may also be a distress call on their part. But like they would wash or eat sour foods after the act of sex, और like there were narratives कि 24 घंटे यही चलता रहता है और हम परेशान हो गए हैं. So that I would think is something that happened now, but of course
So,
worth exploring more.
Purika, very quickly, sorry, I don't want to hog the time, but very quickly, it's important from an FP perspective. The distress that women, because they can't constantly negotiate the sex or demands on sex, but is it coming more from women who aren't protected, like are not right now on injectables, for example? So, or and did you have any sense of that? I know it's not easy, the question I'm asking. I mean, is the distress because they're not protected from by contraception, or is it distress basically their body doesn't desire so much sex? It could be, or it could be both.
I would say that.
And if you don't have a, if you
yeah,
have, sorry.
No, please. Anyone else also please chip in, because I'll try and answer what you're asking. It was also about access to certain things, and that played a major role in all these months. Even if they were protected in the pre-COVID times, those months of agony was something that they wanted a solution for in that period, and hence they were trying to reach out.
Okay.
But please, team members, answer.
So it was about the protection.
I would say so.
Yeah, just adding on. This is also, I mean, this is also sort of linked to what we are saying, that FLW, for women, FLWs are the first point of contact in general. But because even FLWs weren't able to access the PHCs and get stocks, and that fallout, the talk out with them also had an impact on why women were accessing certain things, and the distress was both because of the lack of access and also them like it also comes from the frustration of, like, the way they say it, कि 24 घंटे सिर्फ यही है, and because they are not able to do anything else, the support networks that they had already built, like going out and say being part of certain groups or going out to their natal homes, that was also not available with them. And when they were at home, it was all about sex, and that's how they spoke about it.
Thanks.
I'll quickly cover the learning and recommendations, so that if there are any other questions even related to that, we can take them together. So I'll come with the learnings first. So since that was also one of our research questions, and we did try and explore if there were interlinkages and changes of technology and usage of technology that were there. So technology did play a greater role in family planning activities, as personal interactions had lessened. The government of India released a lot of telemedicine and teleconsultation guidelines for remote distance as well. The acceptance of technology also seemed to have increased, as even for the quarantine centers that were made, the involvement of the PRI members and the digital platforms now being used by ANMs and ASHAs were more than they were using previously, and the dependency also was seen to be higher. And there was specific messaging in certain project areas where there were messaging around FP and short curated things that would come in handy during this period. Zoom calls also were used to train ASHAs in certain cases. They were seen to have a greater reliance on helplines for telecounseling and guidance to reduce the footfall in clinics. That's something that FP programmers and researchers both can look at in the near future. Some things that our experts also sounded out and spoke about was that family planning could be included as an essential service in the Disaster Management Act to prevent the disruption of supply of commodities and services because of the confusion of notification that came out in March, and that took time to get handled. Maybe this is a good idea to sort of look into. Providing psychosocial support, including violence redressal for women and psychosocial support for men as well in the community is important for them to be able to share their distress and narrative. So in our sort of, when we were talking to them on the phone, it did seem that the men wanted to talk, and they wanted to talk at length about the distress they were facing, about the uncertain future that they had. So maybe that's a good point that can be looked at. Next slide, please. Community health workers over the world are burdened with a lot of COVID responsibilities, and they need special attention and focus at this point of time, especially the ones working in the community, because they are not only sort of providing COVID responsibilities, they are also doing the general healthcare, but they're also facing a lot of backlash from the community. So in cases where, because they were the ones who were made in charge to take the migrant men to the quarantine centers, they also, the people, when they come to households to sort of do a survey for COVID, they were the first ones who were stigmatized and pushed away. So maybe there is a very focused psychosocial support and economic benefits need to be put in place for addressing specifically their concerns. The other few recommendations that the group has are that there is a need to advocate for substantive financial allocation for FP, as it is expected that COVID response would divert investments from here to direct work on COVID mitigation, and that's also a trend that we are seeing. Build closer supply as well as information networks with pharmacies and private players, very important, something that is coming out quite a bit, to increase reach of adequate information and not just method access. Creation of common SRH and ST guidelines so that a range of people and across dimensions can access these helplines, and they can act as a go-to resource for most updated information, something that people were struggling to have. And in the several rounds of lock and unlock and different notifications from the government, this may be a very handy tool for the community as well. I'll end it here, but before we end the presentation totally, I would just like to thank the entire research team, all our note takers, and a special mention to our local partners in the field, who were Shramik Bharati in Kanpur Dehat and Gram Parivar Vikas Samiti in Begusarai. Any more questions? We are happy to take.
Great. Great. If there's any other questions from the floor, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Or if you have thoughts, reflections.
So I was struck by an observation around how community health workers were responding to women, and it's not a COVID-related issue. I mean, I think it's one that's long-standing. And I was wondering, for those of you working to promote family planning, sort of access and use, to what extent are there efforts to really build perspective building around gender and gender norms and gender dynamics amongst the frontline health workers? Just curious, because it feels like otherwise the messages are always going to be somewhat mixed, right? In terms of really supporting women's agency and taking into account the constraints that they're living under.
Great. Thanks for that question, Sunita. That was super interesting. Anyone from the ICRW team who'd want to share thoughts on this?
I think probably Sunita, you raised really important point, and probably someone from the program team can respond. I think this has, as you have rightly said, this has been a really long due struggle of bringing gender perspective, building gender perspective as part of FLW or health system capacity building. And it's not really been the integral part of it. I mean, I remember like the quality of care study we had done earlier, and that was one of the key recommendations, that unless we bring this build the understanding among the frontline workers, they will keep focusing on women, blaming them for use or non-use, all the decision, expecting that woman is the one who is making decision without recognizing that they have probably not enough say in the relationship, and how to really contribute in enhancing the women's agency, or bringing the make family planning program more as an empowering and not really just as an instrumental, keep that approach. And I I mean, from my understanding, we probably have taken few steps forward, but it hasn't really reached to the level where it should be. But I think someone from the program team can really share more specifics in terms of the efforts made in this area.
Pranita, I think Padma is here. Sorry to put you on the spot, Padma. Do you want to take this up?
Right. Padma, if you're saying something, you're on mute.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she's on the phone. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Well, thanks, Pranita and Nandita, for your reactions. I think this could be an interesting and important area for us to actually have a discussion with more program colleagues at some point, because it just feels like our broader family planning agenda could just get tripped up by these kinds of norms. And I know we are only slowly beginning to pivot towards addressing norms.
Sunita, I was also thinking there's a presentation within the Bihar health systems context that we'll be making internally on ANMs, and I think it would be really nice to, it's not necessarily a COVID presentation, but if there's a group that is interested in gender and health systems, we can definitely have another discussion on that. There's a lot of work that has been done on this issue, and we also want to bring the gender health systems perspective to CoreNet. So maybe we can, Padma is also ready to talk. She couldn't unmute, but maybe she'll be ready to talk now. So I think it's a good idea to maybe have a gender health systems or health worker discussion again. And I know IWWAG is also doing analysis on that. So in a few weeks, we could do it.
Great. Padma, over to you if you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think she can't unmute herself, and that's
no
the
worries.
issue.
Right. In case if there's anybody else in the room from your research perspectives, I know I'd be putting Divya Nair on a spot, but we chatted about this also last week a little bit. Divya, any thoughts from your side in how, especially in terms of measurement, you've been able to sort of bring this to the fore?
Hi, everybody. Rohan, not as yet, and I'm going to, not add anything here, but we are looking I'm sorry I joined late, but we will be having some data on some of these questions in terms of, access to contraceptives pre and post COVID. And we will have it from, a large swath of the population. So basically, about 5,000 or 7,000 women across 8 states. So I'll be happy to share it then. But currently, I won't add more.
Great. Thanks so much. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot like that, but great.
Hi, Rohan. Monisha.
Hey, hi, Monisha. Please go ahead.
Hi. So thank you, ICW, for this great presentation. I don't have a question. It's more of a comment and observation, more in line with how we are thinking about, normative thinking within the FLW cadre and how to address that, especially with regard to the work they are supposed to do in family planning. But another thing that struck me was from even our past work during Pathways, when we were doing work on vulnerability of women and what are the social environmental factors. And we actually saw this kind of interaction between women and pharmacists and RMP existing pre-COVID as well. And that's an area that I think we should all as a community also think about. How do these informal care providers can be leveraged on and brought into the formal system more systematically, so that their network can be leveraged upon to further the work on family planning, because the informal interactions between RMPs and pharmacists and women around accessing contraceptives, or even as Pranita mentioned, for abortions, loosely exist already. And if this is something that's happening during COVID as well, how can that be thought of when we are thinking about the future programs? Because this is an important cadre and it exists very heavily, and communities depend on it very heavily, especially in the states of UP and Bihar. That's something I just wanted to share.
Great. Thanks for that, Mansha. Wonderful. Any other thoughts from the room? Priya? Sunita?
No, I think this was a fantastic session, and thanks to everyone for all the great thoughts. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So we're almost through then. Great. Thanks so much, everyone, for taking the time to be here. My name is Rohan. You can drop me an email at rohan@quicksand.co.in in case if you'd like to get calendar invites to these coffee hour sessions. Otherwise, please write to us at hello.conet.in. For any other information, join our Slack channels, and please, it'll be great to continue this conversation. Thank you again to ICRW for putting this together, and thank you to especially Sunita for asking us that question and thinking about how we can now gather more partners and work towards this in the future. Great. Thanks everyone for your time. Very quickly, next week we're going to have Microsave, who's going to talk to us about especially government's responses and how they've been able to secure the poor and vulnerable from economic shocks. So we'll be sending material on this early next week, and we look forward to having you join the conversation. Thanks again, everybody. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.